Good morning and welcome to the Blaze and Laser Show. I am Laser Weiss, your host, and with me we have a special guest today. I'm really excited to have Mr. Robert Bilderback, who went viral because he was featured on the Libs of TikTok channel, which if you're not following it, you probably should be, when he went to his school board meeting and he gave them a solid piece of his mind, something I appreciated. And I'm going to play this video. And after I play it, and right before I jump in with Robert, I do want to give just a little setup as to why I feel this is so important and to what I want to accomplish. And then we're going to dive right in. So first, this is the video that really caught my attention, and I think it's really important. And if you haven't seen it before, again, I don't know what you're doing with your life if you're not following this. This is the best thing on Twitter to follow. If no other reason to have this app, this is why. And here we go. This is Robert at the school board meeting in his home county in Louisiana.
Why is it inappropriate for people to dress in business attire? I've done it for every one of my jobs. I don't like it at times. It takes time to put on a suit, as you all know, and a tie and get dressed. There's times you don't do it, but there's times things are appropriate because school is to prepare kids for the future. And we're preparing kids to learn about the basic math, English, science, history. Speaking of which, we need to improve our history, as some of us all know. Let's start working on that. But let's stop indoctrinating children. And this teacher, what really made up my mind was when I went through their social media and I saw that they said, we're weaponizing the rainbow. I'm dressing this way because I can't come out. So I want a conversation started with these children. There's a plan in place. I have nothing against that. I have nothing against people doing what they want to do in their own lives. That is between them and whatever they got going on. What I care about is when people indoctrinate the children, because that is up to the parents and the parents alone. Thank you.
Now, I don't know, by the way, I'm not sure if my audio feed goes through to you. Can you hear it when I was playing it on my end?
No, I can't hear it.
That's fine, but I'm sure you know what it says. Yeah. But in any case, this was like a really dense video. There was so much going on in there, and I really want to try and unpack some of it because I think there's a lot. Like I told you right before we started, I've been a teacher for over a decade, and I've taught a variety of subjects, besides for math, which I'm terrible at. But I've taught history, I've taught science. I'm currently teaching science in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I've taught, U.S. politics and government. So there's so many of topics that I've taught in schools. And one of the things that I mentioned that frustrates me so much is when I see a lack of professionalism. I teach in a small private school right now. I actually am not in the public school system. And it's not to my benefit because I'm getting paid around the same amount as a public school teacher, except less because I don't get benefits that are as good. Public school teachers get way, way better benefits than me. So it's not to my benefit that I'm actually doing that. But that was my choice. That was what I wanted to do. And where I teach now, professionalism is such a major demand. If I would not act in the most professional manner, they would fire me in a heartbeat. And in addition, even though I'm a religious Orthodox Jew and I teach in a private school that is affiliated with Orthodox religious Judaism, they still do not want me to discuss any ideology or religion during science class. That's not the appropriate time for it. So that's something that also speaks to me. And in addition, there's something else I do want to talk about. There's a couple other things I want to get into. And like I said, we'll start from the beginning. We'll take it from the top. And the other two things are, one of the reasons I got out of the public school, I got out of that whole environment. My mother was a public school teacher for 25 years. And I saw during her career how she felt there was this really intense dissent from, I don't know what it was, I don't know what to call it greatness, but from whatever it was, where the ultimate pinnacle was how great of a teacher are you. That was the only thing that mattered, and that was the most important thing. And she felt that slowly began to take a back seat over her time there to other things that were considered just as important. That's one thing. I think there's a crisis in America in the public school system, which I want to discuss. And the final thing is, towards the end, where we talk about what people are doing in their private lives versus what they're going to do in a professional environment. And how much can a person really separate the two? Like at the end of the day, if certain types of behaviors are so defining, is it possible to really keep your private and public life separate? Okay. And I mean, it's just a final note. Why have a conversation with normal people who are not famous? I'm not famous. And even if I'll be one day, I hope I'll never lose the feeling of not. I'm just a regular person. I'm a teacher. My wife's a nurse. I think that in every civilization, as things reach sort of the apex, the elite class, the ruling class, this is something as a history teacher that I've taught, loses contact with the people on the bottom tiers of society. And I don't mean by bottom tiers, I don't mean the people living in the slums. I mean ordinary, normal citizens who their policies are affecting. When things are really going well, the civilization is established, we are prosperous, we live in a land of plenty, in a land of good, the people at the top stop caring. They just think like it's great, let the peons and the serfs have their lives, as long as we get to live on top. And when they lose contact, what's left to fill that void? And so today we have worship of celebrities and worship of famous people and even worship of politicians to some extent. And these people are detached from our reality. The reality of like the ordinary upper or lower middle class American who's just trying to live, pay their bills, and do their job is so detached from them. And the more I hear them talk, and this is not a one-side thing. I'm a conservative. I'm not going to pretend I'm not. And yet I see the same thing with conservative politicians. I don't think that they really understand the struggles of everyday Americans. They're just their lives are too different, and so I think it's so important to talk. And we've seen this year. I think Robert exemplifies this. A wave of uprising in America of ordinary citizens going to school board meetings, getting politically active. And I think that's why, because people are starting to realize the government's not going to take care of me. So, Robert, I want to bring you in. First things first, and this is where I want to start. Have you ever gone to a school board meeting before, or was this your first experience doing that?
I have gone to school board meetings before. It wasn't a common thing. In Caddo Parish, in Louisiana, our counties are called parishes. In Caddo Parish, our schools are some of the worst schools in the nation, especially our public schools. So I've been there a few times. And then when the corona lockdowns and the mask mandates were going on, we also went there to speak as well, because they were requiring some of these special needs children to wear masks, and we're denying their medical exemptions that were signed by doctors. So I've been a few times. I'm a familiar face.
Right, and it's really cool though. But even then, like you're saying, the last few years, would you have imagined 10 years ago? Like, never, right? I feel like so many people who are showing up at these things, even in my life, by the way, like saying I'm a teacher, PTAs. I feel like so many more parents show up now to PTA than used to. It used to be like only the few parents who were like really like the helicopter parents. They would show up. Most parents didn't even bother coming. It's like, yeah, my kid goes to school, he comes home at night, whatever. So I wonder do you think it was the mask thing that made you sort of say, hey, I need to get more involved? What was the trigger for you that made you say, you know what, I need to go to these meetings, I need to be heard?
Well, the truth is I've always been a little involved in politics. I've been a volunteer for campaigns since I think 2012. And so I just didn't really know where to apply myself. But then during the pandemic, a lot of these parents were getting upset because their special needs children were being, in their eyes, tortured in these schools. They were having these things constantly touching their face. And I can't explain what it does to these kids because it's never happened to me. But apparently, it causes them a lot of mental turmoil while they're trying to do their learning. And our state made an exemption for medical exemptions. We also have religious exemptions, and we're one of the few states that also have philosophical exemptions. But all of our state entities were denying every single one of those. So these parents went to a ESSE, which is basically our state school board meeting, and I went there, and we just basically all stuck together, and we had such a great impact there that we've just kept going. And then we came to Caddo Parish and told them that, they tried keeping the masks even after the governor had lifted his order. And we said, enough's enough. And some of the parents even filed a lawsuit. And within a week, 2 weeks' time, they pulled the mask mandate
Yeah,
and let all the children have it.
it's so interesting because this type of multi-layered bureaucracy, it so lends itself to this ridiculous, like the right hand doesn't know what the left is doing. Like this person made a law, but then this entity doesn't follow it, and who's exempt and who's not. It's so funny. You even see this when you're dealing with large companies. I have so many times experiences like I'll call, Amazon and I'll speak to one representative and they'll tell me one thing, and then you hang up and call someone else and they'll tell you, who told you that? That's not our company policy. And, you apply this at a governmental scale. It's frustrating, but not surprising. It's one of those things that makes you think, like all the people who ask for things like government-run healthcare. How much involvement have they had with dealing with government operatives? Have they ever experienced the pain and frustration? Yeah.
As we speak, I'm sitting in the conference room of a doctor's office. Like they'll tell you all about how government's ruined healthcare.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. You mentioned at the board meeting that you got dressed up in a professional attire. If you don't mind sharing, what is it that you do?
Well, now, I'm just a student. I graduated this last December, and I'll take the LSAT at the end of April and start applying to law schools. And until then, man, I'm just kind of doing here and there things. Before that, I've sold cars, I've served tables, I bartended, did security at nightclubs, did some air duct. I've kind of done a little bit of everything.
That's it's so funny. This is the classic American. It's so weird to me. I heard this. I don't know if you ever heard of the Rising podcast with Sagar and Jetty and Crystal Ball. So they're these two pundits, and they have this podcast, and the whole thing is supposed to be that they're the conservative, the super middle of the road conservative, and super middle of the road liberal. But they're both from very wealthy backgrounds, and they're both hired by a multi-billion-dollar company, and they had this podcast. And I was once listening to them talking about the American dream and how what the American dream is if you work hard, you're guaranteed a good life in America. And I remember thinking, like, that is so disconnected from reality. The American dream is freedom. Freedom means if you work hard, maybe you'll have a chance at success, maybe not, but the government won't come and take it away from you. Like, I don't know where this notion came from, that the American dream is that it's coming to you. It's coming to you. No, it's not. What the? So the American dream is, I've been working hard and trying hard and throwing myself at success and hoping that it's going to come if I push myself, but it's my choice and it's my life. And I love hearing that kind of thing because that's very American. It's sometimes like it shakes me. I think like I got married. I don't know. I guess are you married? Do you have kids?
No.
No. Do you have kids in the school system?
No.
But you went there as a concerned citizen anyway. That actually is even more impressive to me. But I'm married for 15 years now, and I remember at the beginning of my marriage when we would sit at the kitchen table and my wife would start crying because we didn't know how we were going to make rent. And I just, like, so many times I hear people talking about, wouldn't you want a social safety net? No. Nope. No, I don't want a social safety net. Well, wouldn't you have? No, I don't care. I would rather not have that benefit. So to me, this stuff speaks volumes. And it's interesting. You're right. I don't really understand the struggle of kids who have these types of special needs. But I guess to a limited extent, when I was single and younger, I had a stint working as a counselor in a special needs facility to make some extra cash. I actually needed money for dating. So I used to work, and I would work with high-functioning adults, and I remember that sensory issues specifically were a huge deal for them. Like some of them, you had to be really careful around them, both auditorily and with touch stuff. They were extremely sensitive. So I can totally, believe, even if I can't empathize to it, I'm not. mentally disabled, thank God. But I can totally relate to the idea that there's definitely something that's extremely difficult for them to deal with. In a broader sense, I'm not sure when this is going to get resolved, but this is something I wanted to get to. I think the public school system is sort of in a crisis moment, in a crisis of faith moment in this country, anyways. Because what exactly does this archaic establishment have to offer? We've everything in America has advanced so much. I don't want to hear what you're going to say because you're involved in that world, and I sort of removed myself from it. Everything in America has advanced so much. You know, where my dad was once paying bills through the mail, I don't even bother checking my mail because everything is online. Every system has changed. The way we bank has changed. The way we drive is changing. And a few years from now, most people might have autopilot in their car. And if not in a few years, in 15 to 20 years, I think that's almost a guarantee. And everything is changing. And yet, so many people in this country are willing to fight for public schools to not change. Public schools have been around since the 1800s, earlier. I don't even know since when. You know, when you had a little brick house with the one school teacher teaching, 20 kids from the town, and they were all different ages. That was how public school started. And they've definitely advanced a lot since then, but it feels like in the last who knows how many years, there's been this huge stagnation. Not much has been happening to the benefit of students. Maybe to the benefit of administrators and teachers, but to the benefit of students, there hasn't been a lot, and we see that in the results. Public school grades in most communities are not going up. They're trending downward. There are exceptions. You might find that one exceptional school that brought in this crazy principal who turned everything around, but those are the exceptions. The majority of public schools have been trending downward for decades. And when you say to people things like, maybe we should consider totally overhauling, like maybe eliminate public schools and open it up to the free market. Every parent gets the equivalent tuition paid as a voucher that can only be spent towards their children's tuition in an accredited institution, but let private entities open their own schools, and people just go nuts at you like you're some kind of like a monster.
I actually have a plan like that a lot of people have seemed to like, except for legislators in our state.
Yeah, and it's wild. And so I think one of the biggest problems, and I'm so curious what you have, because you said something about, you mentioned how we need to improve history, we need to improve science. I wonder what the goal is. So much of what I learned in high school, specifically math, which I passed, even though I don't like teaching it and I don't consider myself great at it. It was such a waste of time. I've never used algebra once. I've never used geometry once. I've never needed to know physics or trig. And most of my friends who are very successful have never needed those skills ever once in their lives. I have friends who work who are bankers. I have friends who are lawyers. I have friends who are doctors. Maybe they needed some of one subject. Like even my friend who's a doctor now, who graduated, he said all the chemistry he needed, he actually learned in college. And the stuff in high school he never paid attention to. and he's at the top of his class. So what are we doing? And the same thing is true with a lot of other topics. A lot of science that's taught is so useless, like earth science. Is it really important to spend a year? And what ends up happening is because there's not really enough earth science, again, if you have an ideologically motivated teacher, they end up talking about climate change a lot. Because, what do you really need to know the difference between igneous rock and the different types, shapes of clouds? And what is all the point of this? And so what we've been seeing in the public school system is this sort of desire to try and define themselves. Like, what are we? And unfortunately, for a lot of people, what the answer is, well, we are actually an institution of training the next generation to what are they going to be? Like, we have to shape them, right? And this is, I think, where this dangerous blurring of lines that you were referring to. What is the parent's job and what's the school's job? Am I sending my kid to school to learn to be a moral human being? Is that what I want? Or what do I want, right?
Correct.
So I'm curious to hear what you think the school, what is the job of a school?
Well, to me, so I think if you're going to say what should the job of the school be, the job of the school should be to teach children subjects, but they should teach children, like you said, these subjects in a way that they can apply them in the future. Because I agree with you. A lot of what we learn in high school and elementary school, middle school, is just wasted time. Most of what I learned either from my parents or from college. But you go to high school and you were just saying, when am I ever going to use algebra? When am I going to use this? And I even said that in college. It wasn't until I stopped college the first time and went out and did some machining work, doing some lathes and milling, where I actually learned that I need some geometry and I need to learn some algebra and all this. And I went back, but I was able to learn it in that quick because I was able to apply it to something. It was interesting. And that's one thing we need to do is start teaching these children, not you need to learn this because it's going to be on a test, but as far as earth science, here's this type of fish. I'm not a science guy. I just finished my last semester and had to take an earth science and was not looking forward to it. I said, why on earth am I taking this? And my teacher did it it was so good at it that at the end of it, I was glad I was there. I didn't learn much, but he was able to teach me something because he was able to take the things we were learning and apply them to the economic chain. He was able to tie them into beauty products, anything that this thing tied into in our normal life, he was able to tie it. And that made it interesting. It was no longer this alien creature you've never seen before. And I think that's a big way to go. As far as what they're doing, I think this is, kind of going down a rabbit hole, but what I think they're doing is they're building a generation of dependent people, and dependent on who or what, I don't know exactly. But, I look at it when I went to school, if you got upset by something, it was toughen up. Sticks and stones break your bones, words can't hurt you. And now, you say something to somebody and you'll get treated worse than if you hit them with the sticks and the stones.
Right. And by the way, just to point out, I think that's one of the reasons why it takes a lot of courage to step forward, because you never know when a video of you saying something is going to wind up on the internet. And who knows if people will be like, this guy's a Nazi.
Well, so a funny story about that, as involved in politics as I've been, I've always tried to avoid the cameras. And so when we went to Baton Rouge to that Bessie meeting, I actually was the first one in the room and got up and moved because the cameras were setting up around me. And my big fear was, I don't want to be in national headlines. I don't want all the negative attention that comes along with it. And by the end of the day, I had said something and ended up on national headlines and got all the hate and stuff that came along with it. But, I sat there and, I was regretting what I did. And the very next day, all the support and love just completely washed that away. And it was like, man, this is probably what I'm meant to be doing, because I did everything I could do to avoid this. And the same things at the school board meeting. You know how many Caddo Parish school boards meetings have grabbed national attention? I've spoken at a few. I don't know of a single one. And so, I went there and a lot of parents were telling me, that they wanted to speak and they're scared not only of the national attention, but even here locally. These people are bullies. And so, I said, look, man, I'll speak. They can't do anything to me. And so, I'll speak in your place. And next thing I know, I'm on Libs of TikTok, and I didn't even have a Twitter. I literally downloaded it because everyone was tagging me in this Twitter feed. And so, yeah, I mean,
it's so interesting. I think it's worthwhile for a second to just recognize also the insanity of this toxic culture that's going on. One thing I see all the time, I hate when people do this, is there's something that means one thing, but it becomes viewed very negatively. And so politicians or people randomly will just call something that. So like, for instance, let's say everybody hates corn. And so you'll have a politician and they'll say like, look at this, it's right-wing corn. And like, what? It's nothing to do. Cancel culture, I hate the phrase because everything becomes so diluted. But I think it's important to recognize what it was. Is people have just lost their minds. The essential idea behind it was that there are people who say things and that have no relevance to the job they're doing. For example, you might have a guy show up at a board meeting and say, I don't want a teacher in the classroom talking about gender ideology. And then somebody will call the construction company he works for and say, do you know what this guy said? right? And the reason we call that cancel culture is because his opinions, whether you agree with them or not, on what teachers should be doing in the classroom, has no relevance to how well he can perform his job of driving a tractor or using a lathe or doing those things have no relevance. But you're saying that he's a bad person, and therefore, it's to hire him associates you with the badness that emanates from him. That's what we call cancel culture, as opposed to, and I think it's important to make this distinction, especially because this is the topic we're talking about. If a teacher says, "This is what I'm going to do in the classroom," that's extremely directly applying to the job that they're doing. And when you say, right, if you're going to do this in the classroom, I don't want you in the classroom. And people are like, I thought you're against cancel culture. That's so ridiculous. That's not the teacher saying, when I go, out in public, this is how I behave. They're saying they're doing it in the classroom. That's their job. I'm making a comment on their job performance. It's not cancel culture. And I hate when people conflate these things and they pretend that it's the same thing because they know that the phrase is viewed so negatively. It's like, look at that guy eating a hamburger. I'm against meat. That guy eating a hamburger, that's cancel culture. No, it's not. Yes, it is, and you know how bad you can call anything, but it's just a lie. So it's not cancel. If a teacher says, I'm going to walk into a classroom with an agenda, then that's not cancel culture to say that the agenda is not appropriate in the classroom. I want to be clear on that.
Well, and to add to that as well, part of cancel culture, I'm someone that's been attacked on that front before. I used to work at a bar, and luckily my boss agreed with me on most fronts. But I was very public in my opinion, and I had said something, and a bunch of people ended up calling up the bar and saying, "Hey, as long as he works here, we're not coming there anymore." And he basically said, "Look, he's a good employee. I'll straighten him out. Like, hold on." And he basically said, "Look, man, you're in a business where we cater to these kind of people. You can't be making our dollars angry and chase them out the door." And that's a fair point. But at the same time, I also realized I want to be in the public eye, so this isn't the job for me. And this teacher, she wants to be in the public eye. Otherwise, she wouldn't be on TikTok doing these things. I was telling one of my friends the other day that if she just went to work with the rainbow hair and the weird slippers and the weird dress and all of that, people would probably just think it's a normal music teacher. They're known for dressing kind of eccentric, But it was her going on TikTok and saying, "I'm doing this because I can't come out as being trans or being gay or whatever, and I'm doing this to spark a conversation." She's the one who said, "I'm doing this as a form of combating the system," not us. And we're also not calling for her to be fired. If she's a good music teacher, like I said, our schools suffer enough as they are. We need all the good teachers we can have. We just don't want her pushing her personal beliefs on children in music class. That's all we're asking. Right. And me personally, if she wants to dress that way, I don't really have an issue with it. I just want you to leave the reasoning behind it out of the classroom.
Right. And I guess that's where the other thing I wanted to, talk about is I don't know why it became this thing where, I don't want to even call it identity politics, but for some reason with many people, something about them becomes so important to them that they have to display it everywhere. So, for me, I'm a teacher. I have a home life. I have a wife. I have kids. And who I am as a teacher is not the same person. I guess in a weird sense, people put on many masks, right? If I'm an entertainer and I walk onto stage, that's not me. That's the entertainer version of me, right? I just as a funny example, there was a TV show called The Office, right? I'm sure you've probably heard of it. It's rather famous. And there was one of the characters was named Dwight Schrute. I had this friend who was a crazy mega Office fan, and I don't even know the name of the actor who plays him. And I've never been that. I'm not into celebrities or even TV or that much that type of thing. But my friend was super, super into The Office, and I remember him telling me once how he's like, man... Oh, Rainn Wilson. I remember him telling it to me. He's like, man, I watched an interview with Rainn Wilson, and it ruined The Office for me. And I'm like, Why? He's like, because he's nothing like Dwight Schrute. I'm like, what? I'm like, what did you think? Right? So, but in that sense, like, when I walk into the classroom, I'm Mr. Weiss, the teacher. I'm here to teach, and I'm putting on my teaching face. And I don't care that I have like a wife or any kids and a life. And those things aren't relevant here. But it does seem interesting to me that for so many people, it's like, this is who I am and who I identify as. And if I put that aside to go and walk into the classroom without all of that, then that's like, that's offensive to me and that's hurtful to me. I can't leave myself at the door. And I'm not sure, what do you think is happening there?
Well, so you hit on another point that I thought of yesterday when I was talking to someone about this is, like you said, you have a wife and kids, family, friends, all of that. All of those people know who you are and you know who they are, and that satisfies you for your personal life. You don't have this need to go and shout it to children, But for some reason, and this reason actually kind of baffles me, because around here we have a pretty strong and supportive LGBTQ community. And, and I'm friends with many of them. And many of them don't have to go and tell their business to children. They even called this kind of weird behavior. And so I said, what kind of an emotionally unstable person has to go and proclaim their politics, their sexuality, their whatever to innocent elementary age children? I mean, that's a mentally unstable person. And now I'm starting to question whether the person needs to be teaching. I mean, that's what happens one day when they snap. I mean, there's elements that go into considering what goes on with mentally unstable people. And I'm not a professional in that field. I'm not saying she is. I'm just saying how it appears to me, because that's just odd behavior.
Right, because like, why can't you be perfect? Why can't you just leave it all behind? Like, leave it outside, and you're here now. This is your put on your game face. It's like, I don't know. The same thing. This is so frustrating because it's the same conversation by sports also. I hated that whole thing. I didn't feel. I hate to say this. I don't want to get too political and be. I don't know if you're a Trump fan or not. I hated the way Trump handled the whole Colin Kaepernick thing. But I also hated the whole Colin Kaepernick thing. I felt like everybody handled that wrong. Because it is true that there was something very unifying about sports in this country. And it's sort of like the same thing. If somebody would come onto the field and, every time they scored a basket, they would turn around and be like, and by the way, I'm trans, and that's important for you to know. That's how I play my sports as a trans. Like, it's like, what are you doing? You're playing basketball right now. Why just play basketball? But yeah, for some reason, it's like people are not. There's this new world emerging where many people feel like their identity has to be a part of every aspect, and it's not okay. And it's like, if you tell them no, it doesn't. You can be a professional now and do that. You're oppressing me. And it's like weird.
So I think there's an element of that, but I also think that this is a opportunity for growing their population, if you will. I mean, homosexuals don't recreate. They have to gain in on their club. They have to gain in on numbers. And children at that age are highly impressionable. So when one day you're a Mrs., and then the next day you're a MX, a mix, and then the next day you're a Mr., and you're doing this fluid back and forth, it's how I feel, doing things based upon how I feel, what I feel like doing is a very dangerous ideology to go by. I mean, sometimes we might get angry and feel like hurting somebody. Should we do it? Absolutely not. So, no, I mean, maybe you do, but there's going to be some serious consequences that go to it. And these people are saying there can't be consequences because I feel this way and it's my truth. And their truths are often lies. So here's one thing, and I mean, this might make some people angry, but it's another thing I've questioned over the past few days. And you being a science teacher, you might appreciate this. In any time we classify anything, there's always a set of traits that match those things. If we're mammals, we have fur and hair and give live birth. If You're a tree, you have a trunk and wood and etc. You know, fish do this. You know, there are characteristics where you can say this is this because outside of feelings, what kind of brain firing pattern or brain makeup or whatever makes a person feel this way? And the thing is I don't think that there is a unifying thing that makes them all the same. I've been looking through the research for the past few days, and I certainly haven't found anything. They haven't published anything.
Right.
Um,
It is actually one of my biggest pet peeves, and I always respond to these comments on Twitter. So frustrating, is when people post things like under any comment by any conservative politician or celebrity, you know, if they'll say something about even J.K. Rowling, is all these famous controversies about this. You know, they'll say something like men and women are different, you know, and then somebody will post like, "You're a science denier because the science is out there." And I actually was curious enough that I went and I tried to find these studies. And there were even some that like linked to, you have to pay for them. And so I paid for studies, and there is no science. And the science, it's all vague insinuations and assertions that are not proven and have not been peer reviewed and subjected to the rigors of science. And so, and it's funny because I don't know, I think a lot of people are just duped. They really believe that the science must exist somewhere.
well, and there are peer-reviewed articles that do say what they claim, but here's the thing about the peer-reviewed journals is it matters who did the peer
Who did
review.
right?
You know, if you went and you got the Trans Board of Trans Associations and Affairs to comment on this, yeah, of course they agreed with you, and they were your peers, and they had similar degrees, and they backed you on it. But they're also not a source that's going to really critique you on that. And that's a lot of times what you find is who's backing them in these peer-reviewed journals is, you know, some little niche of a handful of people, and it's not an overwhelming consensus.
Right.
And another thing they don't know is the last semester on top of that science, I took some research classes, which I did really well at and did enjoy. So I was equipped for that conversation.
It's really frustrating. I don't want to keep you forever, but there is one more thing I am curious about. Get into this if you don't. If so, first of all, do you believe in God?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Straight up, perfect. I never pretend anything other than the fact that my entire worldview has been based around the Bible. I'm an Orthodox Jew, and to me, this is I have this with clarity. So there is one thing I'm curious about because we do take this tack now, which is very politically correct, and it's. I feel like we live in this weird world. I'm not the first person to have said this. This isn't something I came up with, but it is something that I keep seeing more and more. Like, for example, how the morality of the world is shifting because people want other things to be focused on. So, for example, in a traditional biblical morality, you know, adultery is really bad. You know, rape and murder are among the worst things a person can do. But somehow in America, it's sort of like those things are bad, but like being racist is even worse. And being anti-trans, you know, like, is it really, like, is rape really worse than being anti-trans? It's hard to say. So that's really strange. But there is something I want to show you, and I'm curious to get your response to this. One of the things that I think is really important is in the Bible. There's this verse that says, "Kemaisei eretz Mitzrayim asher yashavtem bo." That's the Hebrew. "You shall not copy the practices of the land of Egypt." And what does the Torah mean by that? What does the Bible mean by that? It goes on
Weren't
to
they
explain.
worshiping false gods?
Well, so that's what you would think. But actually, immediately following this, the Bible goes on to list all of the different types of immorality. It's actually talking about sexuality. Let me make myself a little smaller here so you can see this better. Right? It actually says, "Ish kol asher b'sarei lo ysikvu l'gavs ervo." A man shall not come near anyone of his own flesh to uncover his nakedness. And then it immediately brings in homosexuality and a number of other things. It says a person should not be homosexual with his father. A person should not sleep with his mother. And all these different sexual sins. And it's interesting that a lot of the commentators, the traditional commentaries on the Bible, say that the reason for this is, why is the Torah bringing Egypt? Well, Egypt is an example of a civilization that God said, I'm not going to allow this. This can't continue. And Rather famously, he wiped them out at the Red Sea. They rebuilt later, but that civilization was not allowed to continue. And Egypt was very famous for two things. One is the worship of their pagan gods, and the other thing is the immorality. Egypt did not believe in a centralized family unit. They didn't believe in that. You know, what we believe in is a father, mother, children type of family unit, a nuclear, what we call the nuclear family. The Egyptians did not believe in that. They rather famously had harems. They were very famously involved in pederasty, right? The use of boys were for pleasure, women were for children, that type of thing. Sexual slavery was extremely common and widely practiced. And these types of things, so there's, like I said, the commentators on the Bible, they all sort of note that, or not, I shouldn't say they're all in agreement, but mostly in agreement, that what the Bible is really trying to say is a civilization like this is against what human nature is supposed to be striving for. The Bible isn't there just for fun. It's there to teach us how to live as moral people, which essentially is the guide to civilization. And I think that one of the problems we have now is that we've sort of, because we're also in this weird world, is we sort of take this tack of like, look, I don't care what you do in your private life. And there's a certain amount that is true. You cannot control people. People will sin, and it's very, very important. But the question is, where does private life end and where does public life begin? And I think, for me, this is highlighted by the trans issue, and that's what I wanted to mention. When a person says, I am transgender, and this is how they're living their public life, is that really called their private life? Say, well, as long as you don't bring it into the classroom. If you want to go around and live your life as a woman, but you're a man, that's something I don't care about, as long as you leave that at the door. I sort of wonder if that's really called private life anymore. And that's why, to me, it's sort of like, I can speak for my school. If somebody walked in and said, look, I'm transgender, but don't worry, I won't bring that into the classroom. My private school would not touch them with a 10-foot pole. It's not going to happen. And I think that there's something important here that needs to be broken down. Like, is that called private? When a person says, I'm living my life publicly as a transgender person, do we say, well, that's your private business? And it really bothers me. And I'm curious if you think that it is wrong to say, if you want to be a transgender person, I don't know that you can teach my kids, because there's something inherent to the worldview that is,
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know if I would go that far. I mean, like I said, I have some trans friends, but here's the thing: is you would never know unless they told you, because they actually.
I think I would be more okay with that. No, but if I never knew.
Point. That's my point. Is the people who don't want to be public attention seekers, that really are, either suffer from this thing or just built this way, whichever it is. They want to just go and live normal lives however they're doing it. And that's my point, is I'm 100% okay with that. I'm friends with those people, and they're amazing people. I think if they went and got the education to be teachers, they'd be excellent teachers. But when people are so mentally unstable that they feel they need to bring their political and personal beliefs into the classroom, and the question of where does it end? Someone was asking me this, and it was a real religious Bible thumping person who was saying this, and he was upset that these people hold hands and kiss down the street, that kind of stuff should be left for the bedroom. And I said, well, do you get upset when a man and a woman do it? And he said, no, because that's the way God intended. And I said, well, look, while I agree with you on that point, you have to be tolerant of other people. Those without sin shall cast the first stones, and you don't change your neighbor by hating them. You have to.
Let me ask you a question. I don't have a lot. I'm not going to lie. I don't have. I maybe have a couple of gay friends. I don't really have any transsexual friends. But the people that you describe as, let's say, who are transsexual, but they're not unhealthy, do they dress like? Because I know the couple of gay friends that I have who are, I think, trying to just live normal lives. They don't have the stereotypical TV trope cliche gay behavior. When you talk to them, they come off as normal people.
Absolutely.
They're not wearing the rainbow clothes and the funny stuff.
There's also learned behavior. I think there's different degrees to this behavior. You know, I've had some friends that are guys and they're gay and they do the whole exaggerated gay voice and the hand gestures, but they do that knowing that they're over exaggerating. I also have friends who are trans, who are men who dress like women or say that they're women. And I'll be honest, two of them, I was working in a bar and I didn't even know they were men until one day they used their deep voice. I just thought that they were some masculine looking women, you know? And so, but then I heard that voice and I was like, there ain't no way. And I asked them and they were like, yeah, we're trans. And I got to know them and they ended up being amazing people. But that's the thing is they never want the attention. You would never question them if they went into the women's bathroom.
Interesting.
But at the same time, you would also never see them outside of their homes, outside of their female, position, their dress up. They want to maintain that image, and even the ones who haven't been able to afford surgery, they get, fake sets of breasts and the makeup and everything they need, but they don't over exaggerate the makeup. It's not this drag stuff you see at a bar. It's normal women's makeup applied appropriately. And so that's the other thing too, is I think a lot of us, especially as conservatives, need to start reaching out of our comfort zones. We need to start going out and making more of these people our friends. If you find that you don't have friends that fit a certain area, you need to jump outside of the comfort zone. And I'm the same way. I've been doing that the last couple of years, and my life's only improved, and I've learned so much I didn't know from their life stories. But I think that's how we come together. And I'll tell you, one big life-changing event I had was when Black Lives Matter came to Shreveport. And I was terrified. I wasn't going to their rally. I thought they were going to burn down our downtown. And it turned out that some wannabe Confederates were the ones to be scared of. And they were harassing women and children. My friends sent me some videos. So me and some other people in our town went down there with some guns and evened up the fight. Man, and now I'm going blank on where I was going.
You're gonna tell me how it was different than you expected.
Someone just knocked on the door and just completely knocked.
Derailed the train of thought. Oh no.
Yeah, completely jumped me off. I remember. Yeah, talking about coming outside of our comfort zones. So, anyways, by the time this was all said and done, I ended up meeting one of these other guys who brought these guns. And I talked to him and his group of friends who were big in this Black Lives Matter movement, and he actually went internationally viral. Anyways, I found out we were all had the exact same beliefs except about each other. The only place our beliefs differed was what we thought about each other, and it was from false narratives other people had told us. They had told him that I was going to be, because I voted for Trump, I was this racist Nazi, black hating person. And I was told that this dude, some white hating person, wants to burn down our city. And we're great friends now, and that friendship has grown into many other friendships. And so when we do that, I think we find that we all have a lot more in common than we do different. And when you do that, this whole media narrative, like you were talking about, it seems this thing's taking over, our society. It hasn't, but it does seem that way. And it seems that way because of how the media and people who we listen to are able to control the narrative. But when you go out and you talk to everyday people, you're going to see that that's dying. They're on the way out and they're making a big scream as they go.
I hope so. Listen, the one thing I've always said, I always tell this to my students, I said the one thing Americans need to have in common, I said, is not our religious beliefs. This is a free country, and it's not our political beliefs. It's the belief in freedom. I said, as long as we all believe in freedom, that's the unifying feature of an American. So as far as that goes, I'm on board, and I hope that's true. And
it holds true as long as we keep growing, we keep sticking together, we stay in contact, and we keep pushing the same message of liberty. That has to be the message too. While we are religious people, we can talk religion, but we can't preach from an authority that some may not listen to. I think it is important to mention our religion and to tie those seeds in, to plant them. but it's also to speak to people's knowledge of common sense and the way the world works, of the natural order. And I think that once you tie people into the natural order, the natural law of the way of the world, that God just comes naturally to them. There's no way of denying it. But you have to let people work that out on their own and just plant seeds. You can't, throw it at them. Because I got a lot of people I know that like to throw their religion, and it doesn't work.
That is true. And also, those things usually end in a lot of blood and warfare.
Yeah.
But no matter which set of beliefs you're pushing, when you push too hard, so it's one of those things that makes you scared when you see people on either side. This is something I think a lot of people have realized. Like you say, there are a lot of people who are homosexual who it's not a religion to them, and they're willing to, they respect freedom. And it's really only the ones who believe that it has to be. I mean, that they won't say it's a religion, but to them, it's their ideology and it's their core set of values and beliefs are defined by these types of behaviors, and that's when it's dangerous. Because the same way a fundamentalist without tolerance wants to push his set of religious values, they want to push theirs, and that's where the conflict zones end up hitting each other.
Absolutely.
It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much
for having me.
And maybe we'll get to do this again sometime.
Yeah, hit me up anytime. It's been a pleasure. I love history topics.
I do also. I think history is a crime. How undertaught. This is a side topic. If you need to go, you can go. But it's just I don't want to get into a whole rant. But I remember vividly once telling my students, this is years ago during the Obama years. This is not a political. I said, in many ways, when you follow the arc of civilizations from ancient times till now, every civilization goes through phases. At the beginning, there's this excitement, there's the building, everybody's filled with purpose and they're willing to sacrifice because they want, we need to build. They say, you look at Rome came out of this tiny little country and they unified and they went on to conquer so much of the civilized world. And you look at Greece and you look at Persia. I said, and then what happens is they finish conquering. There's not much conquering left to do. We did it. And then everybody settles down and they start getting wealthy and they start building these empires. And then all of a sudden you have these massive class divides as the wealthy get wealthier. That's just normal. People and people act like this is something that's happening in America. This is literally something that's happened in every civilization. This isn't special or unique. And then the rich start getting richer while the poor start getting poorer. And then the government starts giving out handouts. I was like, literally this happened in Rome to the T, and it happens in every civilization. It's happened in Germany and it happened in France, and the government starts giving people stuff for free in order to keep the lower levels happy, while the rich people start building bigger and more advanced power structures. And then you have corruption sets in as the people on top want to be able to take more advantage of their wealth and power. And then the people on the bottom get more angry. I said, like, we are in an arc in our civilization as America. I said, and maybe the only benefit that we have, which is why it's so tragic, is they didn't have the access to history like we do. We can look at what everyone before us did in an unprecedented way with the internet and the resources we have and be like, hey, how can we avoid making all their mistakes? Yep. It's like the fact that we're not doing that is so painful.
Well, and the fact that it's taught, I don't know about where you live, but where I live, it's taught just so poorly. In Louisiana, I think you're taught about Lewis and Clark, the Revolution, briefly the Civil War, and you might get into some more modern stuff, but you literally hit them all as talking points. You got a couple multiple choice things over each, but you never go into, why did they go this route over this route, or what went into these decisions? What was the outcome? What was their purpose? When I first learned about Lewis and Clark, it just sounded like two teenage dudes who decided they were going to hop on a raft and float the Mississippi. And that's what they did. And then I got up to college and I go, oh, this was actually an intricate, exploration. They had tons and tons of people on this thing. Yeah. And so, you learn the actual cool details and you go, man, there's cool lessons in a lot of this. And like you said, what's happening to us has happened to Rome and countless other civilizations throughout history. And some of these homosexual things have even happened throughout history. And I hope
Yeah.
it doesn't turn out the same way it does for him. But, you know,
Yeah, it's so it's like one of the things I remember had a big impact on me growing up. Not just because I'm Jewish, but because it was so interesting. Nothing has had as much of an effect on world history as the genesis of monotheism. I'm using the word genesis not in the biblical sense. Like monotheism and the ideas that developed from it were a cataclysmic change. From that came forth Christianity, and largely a lot of the social ideas that we have of how people should live in a civilization. Right, like I said, if you look back at it's fascinating. Dennis Prager makes this point very well, actually. But even before him, this was something I was aware of. If you look at ancient civilizations, no one before monotheism believed in a nuclear family. No one. The monotheism only came into the world about 2,000 years after civilization. But, by any standard, whether you believe in the Bible or not, the first signs of civilization archaeologically are around 5,500 years ago. It just happens to coincide with what the Bible says when the world was created. That's just a coincidence. Don't pay any attention to that. But even so around 2,000 years later, monotheism bursts onto the scene. So you have America seems like it's been here forever, right? People are like, oh, wow, look at all these ideas. This is how I grew up. Isn't this how the world always was? No, America's like 200-something years old. We're babies, right? So 2,000 years, that's a long time. And in 2,000 years, no one ever came up with these new ideas. Everybody was like, no, there's no such thing as a nuclear family. Slavery is totally fine. The corruption of the judges at the highest level was the norm. The rulers rule in accordance with their whims. And monotheism was this cataclysmic change to the whole challenge to the entire belief system of the world. And you know how many pages it is? And what was in my history book in high school? It was half a page.
Yeah,
There was like, it was like Phoenicia. There was like literally the page was Phoenicia, which had new ideas about trading. That's really important. And monotheism. And the title of the page was Ideas on the Move. Phoenicia and the budding nation of Israel had new ideas about how people should live. Phoenicia had new ideas about trade, and the Jews had ideas about monotheism. And then there was like a little graphic on the side about the 10 Commandments, and that was it. Like, that's not really so important. And it's like, this is literally the most important thing that ever happened in ancient history. It's a cataclysmic event that changed all of society forever. And even Christianity, which, arguably would say, well, Judaism is a minor religion in a global sense. I don't remember Christianity getting that many pages either in my history book. I think there was much more on Egypt, ancient Egypt, which is not relevant to us at all.
Well, and if they do talk about Judaism or Christianity, they'll usually also counter it with a "but this." This is what they say and this is what they think, but this is why it could never happen. My earth science class, it did not want you believing in creationism. It didn't matter if you first opened the book or were at the very end reading about a cuttlefish. They were going to remind you why creationism wasn't real.
Right.
And all I say to them is, even atheists believe in creationism. Because all creationism says is that something more powerful and unknown than us created this. And what created the earth? You say a big bang and some pool of some stuff. That's cool, but what created that? What made those forces go together? And whatever that force is, there's your God.
Right.
It's very to me.
Years ago, I remember seeing even an interview somewhere. I looked for it, but this is like going back to when I was in high school, and before the internet, and I could never find it. Years ago, I remember seeing a scientist talking about how evolution has basically been disproven, and how they still teach it in schools, and it's so accepted to the extent that even now, just recently, Herschel Walker, who's a politician who's running for governor or mayor or something. And he was mentioning how he doesn't believe in evolution, and he was roundly mocked for it. But there's a book, I always try and promote this book because I love it. It had such an impact on me. I didn't need it, but it's so good to see from a science perspective. Lee Spetner, who's a PhD, spent 20 years researching evolution. And I think he wrote the most definitive book on it, where he said that, when he started writing this book and researching it, all he wanted to do was understand evolution. And at the end, he said it was extremely clear that evolution is absolutely impossible the way we understand it. Like the idea, it's a very scientific book. It's called not by chance, shattering the myth of evolution. And he's a PhD, and it's very heavy. And like there are times that he shows like at the micro level DNA and how it works and how it's formed and how the differences between DNA and different species, and lower life forms and higher life, they could not actually have evolved. There's simply no crossing over, and yet even today, it's like such a part of the zeitgeist. It's such a part of the American psyche that like people will just lose respect. Oh, you don't believe in evolution? Oh wow, you're just like a loser.
So
It's not true.
remember how I told you about how we win, though? Is
Yeah.
you have to appeal to the authorities they know. So even let's say you don't believe in evolution, and to be honest, I'm not enough of a science guy to have a theory one way or the other. Evolution sounds good to me, but creationism also, I think the two coexist. So what I do is I synthesize the two of them. I say, absolutely, I believe in evolution. We evolve in our lifetime. A few years ago, I was this tall. I was a foot tall. And here I am. I'm 6 feet tall. Of course I evolved. And so, yeah, of course, I'm no science denier. But are you going to deny that something more powerful than us didn't create the world? You're sounding like the science denier now
Right.
to me. And so take their little jab and hit them with a hook.
I hear that. I hear that. But I do recommend, seriously, if you ever want to read an interesting book on the topic, somebody who really thoroughly goes through it, I can't recommend that book enough. But yes, you're
Do
right.
me a favor and send that to me in a text or a message,
I
because
will.
I will forget on my drive.
I will. Thank you very much for this conversation.
Yes, sir.
Like
Thank
I said
you.
before, you stayed extra, and I appreciate it. It's really been a pleasure.
Anytime. Likewise.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, that was really fun and enjoyable. I hope you guys enjoy watching this as much as I enjoyed having that conversation. And that's all.